Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Gooey Lawrence. I am taking over for Camera Mandy today. Let's get some guests up in here. All right. By everybody in Twitch responding up, I'm guessing stuff's coming through. Please, at any point, if you're hearing echoes, background music, somebody's annoying, you don't like our face, let us know. We'll go ahead and work out those issues as we go through. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Goo Morning Zyathe.
Good morning. Good morning.
Goo morning.
Good morning.
Absolutely. All you guys get to do all that. I've been so unplugged from Gooey Cube. The only reason they bring me in here is because I'm like one of the few people technically proficient enough to like fix this stuff if it breaks. And then essentially you all are here to provide the personality. So thank you for coming on over. For our announcements that we have going on today, obviously I'm going to be taking over for Cameraman D and Alphinius Goo for the next 3 weeks. They are away in a far off land, and they were very vague about what my roles and responsibilities were. So I'm just going to go ahead and say that I am now High Lord Commander of all of Gooey Cube. Everybody should fear me as I plan to reign with an iron fist. So
we like a good time.
We Hatters will take you down. It's fine.
Oh no, I'm with the Hatters are revolting, man. I'm leading the rebellion. That's what we're doing. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna slim out. I'm gonna fire some people. We're gonna hire some stuff. We're gonna have random discounts. You guys are just gonna have to be ready for like flash giveaways in the middle of the night for 30 seconds. You know, 100% off modules. Like it's just gonna be great.
Get behind, yeah.
But I'll be taking over. This week, we are talking about writing better stories, how to play them, as well as how to keep your players immersed at the table or online. Next week, we're going to be talking about, and it's kind of funny, Camera Mandy totally missed what I was trying to do with this, but essentially, if you guys don't know, I'm actually a Special Forces Green Beret, as well as an avid nerd. And so one of the most difficult things for any like group is how to plan how to take down an encounter.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing more frustrating than like, you know, as a DM just sitting there watching everybody like squabble like how to cross a bridge, and it's just like, hey guys, like this is not hard, like let's just make a decision and go.
It's not trapped.
Exactly. So I have that same mug, Thomas. That is awesome.
You need that mug, okay?
Yes.
But essentially I'm going to go through and kind of guide through like, hey, this is how you'd plan this in the military, and hopefully bring some structure to your guys' playing sessions, as well as we're going to talk about mental health at the table, different things that you can do in order to help support players or DMs that are going through different struggles inside of their lives. And then last up, we're going to have another player immersion panel on June 10th. We're going to bring in some of the writers at Gooey Cube to kind of go over everything. So super excited for that. Other announcements that we have are, at some point, everybody's supposed to put in hashtag maps into the chat. That is supposed to enter you into some giveaway for what I'm assuming is going to be free cars. So again, put in hashtag maps. That is supposed to do something. And again, as High Lord Commander, you know, check under your seat. There may be, you know, keys to a new car. You know, everybody might get a new car on this stream. Who knows? This is all Alphinius's and Camera Mandy's fault. And then last up is the backstory contest. I have none of the details for that. I just know that there is a backstory contest and that there's a deadline for it. Would anybody else like to talk about what that is?
The contest officially ends as of June 1st, and it's for the upcoming characters that are going to be used in the upcoming campaign at Gen Con. And we all saw all the amazing illustrations and the backgrounds on them, and I believe all the details are on the Gooey Cube website for anybody who wants to look at all the characters and their backgrounds and their details to flesh them out.
Ace is already infinitely more qualified to run this than I am. So I guess now there's a backup. Actually, as my first competitor and competition, I'm probably just going to have to take you out to make sure that you do not become High Lord Commander of Gooey Cube. So you kind of shot yourself in the foot on that one.
No, I want to be the advisor. I never want to be the guy. I want to be the guy next to the guy so I can leave if things go bad.
All right. I'm going to keep my eye on you, though. Just so you know, you're on probation. With that, let's go ahead and get to know everybody here. Stacy, would you mind introducing yourself to the group? Tell us what got you into Dungeons and Dragons, and if you could have one D&D spell, which one would you choose?
Oh, wow. Well, I'm Stacy. I've been playing since 1984-ish. Well, that's what I'll admit to. Been doing this for quite a bit of time through a lot of mini editions. One spell. I'm going to go Toll the Dead. The best cantrip in the game. But that's just what's off the top of my head.
Whoa. Toll the Dead is the best. Prestidigitation is the best cantrip in the game.
Oh gosh, I'm not that OCD, laundry. But yeah, laundry. See, Toll the Dead. I think I like that one. Off the top of my head, you caught me off guard there with that one. No, I know you guys have met me a bit. Been around the game for quite a bit of time. I'll let the guys take some airtime.
Thank you, Nerf Herder. The link for the contest is in the chat. It should be up there. It's up on the screen. Yeah, go ahead and copy that in. If you're feeling spicy. But yeah, it's worldofgooeycube.com/contest and all the other stuff. So with that, Ace, why don't you go ahead, give us a little background. What do you do in order to feed yourself? And if you could be one D&D class, what would it be?
Well, my name's Ace Overton. I've been a DM for the better part of a decade now. And my day job to pay the bills for all of what I do to pay for my D&D habit and hobby is I work in corporate insurance, which I've done for a couple of Fortune 500 companies, which ironically their headquarters are only like 8 blocks from each other. It was really weird to go from one to the other, but they really like this small Midwestern town for some reason. As far as my favorite class, I would probably go with my first class that I ever made for my character, which was a fighter, but a 2-wielding longsword fighter. Yes, he was a half elf, and he has nothing to do with me liking R.A. Salvatore at all, not in the slightest. Zero compulsion that he also has silver hair or anything.
I do want to point out, if you did a census of just young teenage men, and we're like, hey, create a character, and whether or not they were exposed to R.A. Salvatore or not, like, guys have a type. We very much like all of our like main like little OG characters are so in the same realm. It's very funny.
I've liked them over the years because I've stretched out, but it was my first character. I was like, it seems simple, but people underestimate exactly how devastating a fighter can be. Especially all the magic users, like I can do all the big things. Like, cool, I murdered everybody else while you did the one big thing. So it's always nice to be able to know that I have swords and weapons. I have options at my availability.
I just want to point out that both Stacy and Ace so far, I've been like, hey, if you could be this in the real world, what would you be? And both of them chose to kill people.
The option to kill people.
The option, the capability.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I'm watching both of you. All right. And Thomas, thank you. The only one representing the Hatters today. Or I guess actually that's a lie. Stacy, she's got her dinosaur. She's rocking it.
Yeah, this one's hot. I think I'll switch out here.
There you go. Perfect.
Revolution.
Thomas, let us know what got you into D&D or just tabletop role playing in general. And if you could have one D&D beast as a pet, what would it be?
Oh man, I want to go back to what class would you do? So I've been playing since about the same time as Stacy. I was a pre-kindergarten type, and my mom's boyfriend at the time kind of dug D&D. It was still fairly new to him, and he would have like little live action LARP campaigns, and we would play them out in the living room until I hit him in the head with a 2x4. That's a thing that happened for sure. As far as what my pet would be, if I could tame a gelatinous cube, I would.
Okay. Dungeon Reba?
Yeah, Dungeon Roomba, and I would definitely put it in the hallways of my office to take care of some problems that we have there, for sure.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you didn't know, the theme for today is choosing violence. So, and then, ladies and gentlemen, I am your host for the day. I am Gooey Lawrence. To put bread on the table, again, I'm a Special Forces Green Beret. I started playing when I was around 12, DMing. My original character was, Ranger, silver hair. I was a bow guy. I wasn't a swords guy though, so I felt, a little bit better about that when I finally got around to actually reading the books. I was like, oh, cool. At least I'm kind of original. But aside from that, I am Cameron Mandy's brother and just general lord of all chaos. My goal is to never be asked to do this ever again. So we'll see if we can get fired. But let's go ahead and jump into our discussion topics for today. We're going to go ahead and flip them up. And I want to talk about player immersion. And I feel like part of that is because writing better stories is part of that whole player immersion aspect. And so, Nama Stacy, I was wondering if you don't mind kicking us off. What does player immersion mean to you in 3 words or less?
Oh, no, that's not going to work.
Go ahead, take your time.
Player immersion. I think back in the olden days, I mean, it was Avon calling. You walked through a bunch of caves because the goblins took it over, and you just walked from room to room, and there was no story. Not anything overarching. Then the goblins took over the caves and were raiding the countryside. So story immersion means that there has to be more than that, and it has to draw everyone in. And I think that's become something more difficult over time. That there has to be story first, monsters second, and that is where I think that the approach to D&D and what we do has changed over time. We're writing the book first. Maybe that's my 5 words or less.
I like it. I like writing the book first and kind of going through. So, Thomas, do you mind kind of elaborating a little bit? How do you write a book, or how do you start forming that story in order to get that player immersion, especially when you do not know the roads or the actions that your players are going to take?
So when I write my own campaigns, which it's been a while, I definitely look for a specific scene that I want to have acted out. With all of the paths that I want to, that I can foresee it taking. And then I also, for player immersion's sake, I will write 1 or 2 very engaging, at least to me, NPCs because that is how you're going to hook your characters. Yes, the story is important, and I agree with everything that Nama Stacy said. But if you don't have something other than the dungeon and the monsters, if you don't have somebody driving it along, there's no immersion.
Absolutely. As you're forming that up, Ace, do you have any tips for going through and organizing and actually essentially how do you reference that story that you're creating that's open-ended, where especially like what Thomas was talking about, like you're trying to predict all the different roads that this thing can end up? Like, what's some of your organization methods that you kind of go for that?
For me, I try not to. I have the tendency to over talk, which helps me at work, but also can bog me down when I'm writing my story. So I try not to overly get into the details or go into the 5-year generational history of the thing that happened. I like to give enough that I have the intro and beginning, and then from there I can flesh it out as we need to, because all as DMs, we fleshed out something we thought was amazing. It was going to be the best thing ever, and the players walked right past it. Despite all the flags and arrows pointing to it, they just went past, and you're like, okay, well, that's useless now. Never mind. So I like to try to keep most of my things open, though most of the times my biggest thing is to key thing that I've learned to do, that I've stolen from Marvel and Abria Iyengar, is that at the end of a session, if there's some type of lore that I want to make sure the players have a buy-in or aware of, if they've never been anywhere around it, I give them an after credit scene after the session's officially ended, that gives them a glimpse into something happening somewhere else. And my players live for those moments because that's immediately when they're taking all the notes because they're not engaged, they're not involved. There's just information. And even if they don't know how it's useful, they want to know it so they can refer back to it later in some other way. Like, oh, that's the guy from a month ago that said he was going to do terrible things to somebody I know. I don't know that in character, so how do I deal with this?
I actually love that idea of doing like a cut scene or like a credit scene essentially to go through and kind of work some of that. I'm going to definitely steal that. Oh, yeah. So one thing that I want to bring up to kind of the group, and I'll let you guys kind of chime in, which whoever has to answer this. I do think one of the most difficult things for DMs and when you're going through and you're running your table is in order to really immerse your players, you have to be able to analyze your players. You have to be able to understand what motivates them, what goes through, and what is going to get them to buy into your campaign. Because we've all had that. We've all had a game where either A, you've put zero work into it and you're just trying to get it going. And then you have a player who is so bought in and you're like, bro, I need you to slow it down just a little bit because I'm not at the same speed as you, or vice versa, regardless of how much you have put in to this person's backstory, how many props you've got or whatever, you can't get this player to get in and buy into your world. So I'm going to kind of open it up to whoever has answers. What are some of the different motivations that you see just in general behind players? And then what are some of the clues that your player is going to give you in order to say like, hey, what are their motivations and kind of moving through and whatnot? I'm going to open up whoever has a response. Go ahead and just go for it.
Go ahead, Thomas.
Oh, thank you. So I found that for the most of the players that I've ever played with, including one shots, there are three motivations. It's either some kind of power trip and just being the strongest. You've got the people who just want the loot, and then there's the people who really are only there for the story. And there's usually a mix of those three amongst any random group. Mm-hmm. So you have to learn balance, because some part of your campaign is going to bore somebody else somewhere. Mm-hmm. And so you really do have to balance between the three. And if you just focus on any one of those three things, your campaign is going to be boring.
Mm-hmm. So we got story, we got loot, and then what was your third one?
The power trip, gaining levels. The power trip. Yep.
Gotcha. Nama, Stacy, what do you got to add on to that?
I absolutely agree. What are those motivations? You're appealing to their honor, or whether they want just glory or loot. I try to draw them in a little further. Maybe sometimes it's more personal. I will try to appeal to their class, something to the cleric. There's something that is more towards their deity related, some writing on the wall, or something that's related to an altar cutscene for that specific class. There might be something that the fighter needs to break through, or something that centers around that specific class, or something more intelligence-based for the wizard. So I try to draw them into the story that way and appeal to their character and their class as well, on top of that just base motivation of why are they going into this temple.
There's definitely something to say about like one of the ways to get characters to buy in is by making something special for that specific character that the rest of the group doesn't get access to.
Yes.
And that's always really fun when they just like keep that and then they just don't tell anybody the entire time. You're like, right, but at some point you have to share that. Like,
or they forget.
Oh yeah, that's the other great one too. Ace, did you have anything to add in?
Yeah, I would say the best way that normally, because most of my campaigns, like I said, they have some type of combination of all those. Normally, I try to get the why behind all of that in a session 0 to understand their motivations of why they created this character and what they hope to dream of it being one day. And then from there, I try to do my best to use my creative skills to blend those stories together in the Final Fantasy VII way of all of us are doing random things and suddenly everything that we were doing all is a part of the exact same issue and story that we never considered coming because I wrote it all together. That's why I made this mix happen. It didn't just happen by accident. You're now all family and friends. So now go save the world together.
Absolutely. one of the things that I definitely think is interesting as you're kind of going through and trying to analyze your different players and trying to get the buy-in and stuff as you're working it is when you're running that session 0, one of the easiest things you do is ask people what makes games fun for them, and then what are they expecting. One of the ways that I get buy-in is, especially when you bring a character concept to me, if you bring a character archetype like Batman, like Aang from Avatar: The Last Airbender, if you bring me a main character, I actually tell them, no, you can't. This isn't how this works out. And one of the reasons is because when they're basing their character solely off of that main character from whatever their favorite series and stuff is, the buy-in comes from them being the spotlight and from them being the main character of that story. And if you set them up like that in order to try and, again, your intentions are pure. You're trying to just facilitate them being able to play a character that they want. But when they go into that mindset of my buy-in is I'm the main character, I'm the center of attention, I'm the person who's, the rogue that's in the back of the tavern and people are supposed to approach me and all this kind of other stuff, you end up setting them up for failure because at the end of the day, you're not going to get that buy-in. They're not going to get that buy-in of being that one hero that saves the world. It's nope, you're on the Super Friends and you guys have to work as a team. One of the questions that I saw in the chat here, moving on up a little bit, was essentially, and I'm just going to paraphrase it, how do you balance between a group where you have some players who are super invested and then some players that maybe aren't there? What are some of the strategies you guys use in order to help get people kind of to meet in the middle?
Go ahead.
Not everybody answering at once. That's a good one.
We're too nice to each other. We're like, do you want to go? I would say for me, the biggest buy-in again is I try to do my best for those characters, knowing what it is that motivates them. If they're not a magic user, things that are heavy in magic lore to the fighter that has 0 magical skill are not going to interest them. It's going to go over their head in and out of character. So it's going to be like, I don't know what to do with that. But I try to make sure that there are things that can still tie to it, so that way the person can still be invested and still be engaged. Because even though you don't know how to read the magical spell book, if the barbarian grabs it, all of a sudden everybody else who knows what it is highly nervous that they have the highly dangerous thing and they might do something wrong or bad or at the very worst destroy it. So I try to find different ways like that to keep them still engaged in a logical way that makes sense for their character without it being game breaking in some way of them just trying to find some way to entertain themselves with chaos. If you don't keep the children engaged, chaos is what then immediately comes afterwards because they're going to mess with stuff.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go ahead, Thomas.
As someone who DMs a lot of Chaos Goblins, like I totally get that. But on top of it, what I found is that you get those people who are who aren't engaged unless they're actively doing something. Usually the fighter types. No offense to the fighter types there. So they become my main focus during like dungeon crawls. Mm-hmm. And then so that they feel important and they get all the puzzle pieces, but they don't know what to do with them. And then all of my subplots go towards my story people. Any kind of sub like character development, the fighter types that I have that are purely there to beat things up. Go beat the things up. Just be quiet when the adults are talking. It's fine. And we'll, we go through that and just have those puzzle pieces and character development go to the other types. That way it's a good mix and, everybody's respectful about it.
That's definitely one thing that I don't subscribe to the fact that you have to have the entire group engaged the entire session. I'm also a big proponent of split the group. That being said, as a DM, I'm also aware, like, hey, if they split the group, I need to adjust whatever. I essentially make sure that there's better runaway mechanics and things like that. So it's like, hey, they split the group, they can actually go through and they can run away. I'm not going to let mechanics get in the way of that stuff, but making it really easy for like, hey, we are in a dungeon. There are some people who want to go full tactical, go on in, take everything out, clear the rooms, work it all out. Excuse me for one moment. Mama Stacy's going to sing real quick while I clear my throat. Totally dropped the ball on that one, but that's okay. Giving them that opportunity. And then again, when it's role play time, hey, if the fighters and stuff like that want to go through and be playing on their phones, making dice towers or anything like that, I don't let that get in the way of me engaging the people who are really in on this. And then if I want to go through and cue people in, I work with it. I'm going to give everybody here a little piece of like top secret, like government information here. All right. So everybody get in close. Also, again, make sure you don't, tell anybody else this, because if you tell anybody, I'm gonna have to kill you. So one of the things that is really good, if you have somebody who is not engaging, whether or not it's their first time playing, whether or not it's whatever's going on, match their energy. Start off whatever your session is, and don't go on and try and just overwhelm them, and don't try and be a wave that's going through and just going to crash into them. Match their energy for a little while. What this is going to psychologically do is make them feel more comfortable. It's going to make them relax. It's going to make them just feel safe. One of the easiest ways to do this, and some people know, some people don't, based off the body language, copy their body language. Next time that you're out with a friend getting drinks or doing whatever, copy your friend's body language. Do it for like 45 minutes. Then change your body language and you will watch them copy yours. There's this crazy concept, and you can look it up, and there's FBI and CIA studies and all this kind of different stuff. You can go through and you can copy somebody's body language subconsciously. They're basically going to get on the same wavelength as you. And then you can go through and help guide them to get invested into their story. As you go through and as you match their energy, let them feel comfortable, let them feel good, and then you can actually go through and you can bring them in, and you can help immerse them as you're going through, and you're really watching and you're actually getting them involved and working it. So that's my little, like government top secret thing for you there.
It's a sales tactic.
Yeah, it's honestly, it's a sales tactic as well. And if you think about it, anytime that you're at a car lot, or anytime that like you actually had a really good salesperson, they didn't come in and were just like, hey, come on over here and check this out. And, they probably came on over, made you feel comfortable, made you feel like you can trust them, and made it eventually. So that way you ended up going to them to actually go through and work with it. So with that, also secrets of chefs. I'm seeing your stuff. Don't worry, I'm going to get to it here. So, but with that, what are some of the strategies that you guys use? I'm assuming, how many people here have played online before, just during COVID or otherwise? So I've done it's actually really funny, because I bring this up with Alphinius anytime that I play with him, and I'll just be like, oh man, it's really nice at the end of an online game when it's like 11 o'clock, you just turn off your screen and go to bed. You don't have like a 45-minute drive. And he's like, I'm just saying there's benefits. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying it's better. I'm not saying that tabletop, with all the minis and stuff isn't the best. I'm just saying sometimes it's really nice to just be like, I don't smell really good. I don't really want to shower, but they're not going to smell me. So, so for those of you guys who have played online, what are some of the different techniques and stuff that you've used in order to immerse your players, especially when that technology makes it a lot more difficult? I'm kicking this one over to Ace, because Ace looks like he knows what he's talking about.
Well, most of my sessions have been online recently, just because ever since everything happened and my setup, it's a lot easier for me. And now I play with people across the country, so they're not coming cross states every week just to come play the game, but they want to stay engaged in everything of that nature for the stream. So the best way that I found is to normally, much like we did, you go through and check everybody's settings, make sure that they have a good feed, make sure they have the good settings, make sure there's a backup plan that if they can't be on, for my streams, if something happens, if there's a power outage somewhere or something of that nature, then naturally I just basically pilot their character until they can never come back in, which oftentimes...
Ace, just so you know, there's an assassin behind you. I just wanted to let you know.
Oh, that's my 12-year-old shadow assassin that just pops up and asks for food like every 6 to 8 hours. So
okay, just making sure you know.
I just accepted that. But in general, that's the best thing that I can do, is make sure that there's time for that, and also plan their engagement, because not being at the table and being engaged, for a couple of my players who are on the spectrum, they interact best face to face. They need to see me and read my interactions to be able to feel engaged in the game. So I always make sure that my camera is working, that my audio is great, and that I can focus in and look at the camera when I'm speaking to them. So that way, even when they're somewhere else, they feel as if I'm right there talking to them in the moment. Whereas other friends who stream all the time, I could be in the kitchen yelling, and they're like, "I'm locked in. I'm here. I heard everything. I'm fully immersed in the story." So it's knowing your players and knowing how you need to engage with them to get that kind of deep engagement.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the benefits of all, obviously, the Gooey Cube products and stuff like that. When you are running a digital game, when you just go through and when you buy the digital version of them and stuff like that, being able to go through and use all the pictures and stuff, match it up with music. And then the nice thing is that luckily, I think thanks to video games, I think there's a lot of aspects where with a certain level of input from your DM and from your group and stuff, you can suspend your disbelief once you get into the screen and stuff like that. But there's definitely an aspect of it where it's a little bit of a learned tendency. And once you kind of learn how to go through and adjust that, it ends up becoming really easy. And that's where having a consistent group is such a blessing. Thomas or Nama Stacy, either of you guys have anything you want to add? Nama Stacy's got something. Go for it. Thomas, be quiet. Let her speak. Come on.
I got a lot. I've been running online games like 5 nights a week for the past 3 years.
5 nights a week?
Yeah.
Holy cow.
And then I do a lot of training as well on Roll20 and things on top of that. So I can really kind of speak to the difficulties of immersion in that type of environment because we don't really use video at all to really pick up on those visual cues of, who could be really immersed in the story or the game, but they're on mute and we have no idea because maybe they've got kids or something else going on in the background and we're really not cued into what's going on with that player per se. If there's anything that we need to know or pick up on or really kind of direct the story to them, sometimes that's a little bit harder. So as a GM in that environment, you really have to call upon that player or direct the story to them. Or maybe what I like to do is make threads. So I tie my players together with their backstories. Maybe they know each other from their town, or I'll give them bonuses. If they're standing next to this person when they attack, they get a +1 because of whatever reason. So I'll tie some players together that way. Maybe this one's not as immersed, so I'll make sure something works for them if they do something together with this other player who's very, very immersed. And that could just be something that I'm picking up on, whether their interaction midweek in our Discord channels or somebody's very active and participating and someone really isn't. I'll try to pair those people up for some story cue. But it's difficult because we don't really know in that type of situation who really needs to be pulled in and who needs that extra assistance without them coming forward and really kind of letting us know that they need that additional assistance. So I think this is a really it's difficult that way because it's hard to match their energy. You don't know what's going on. So you as the GM have to really be that energy. You have to come and bring it every week. And it's a lot, we bring the story, we bring the energy, we try to bring everybody in every week and connect everybody. And I know it's easy at the table. I love it at conventions. Genghis, it's so great. You can pick up on everyone, you can bring them together. And I love it because I can see what's going on and who might need a little extra assistance and make them change seats or whatever it is. And I really love that energy. But online, I think that is a whole other conversation. I think a topic of immersion that we could have a whole other hour on of just how different that is than at the table of what you've got to do with your players. And sometimes I think you can miss cues with players if you're just not seeing them or not knowing what it is that they need to be more immersed. And you can try, you can put yourself out there and you can really tie them together. But I really enjoy it. I think it is a different style of immersion with players, but I don't know. I really want that conversation. I think maybe even Thomas and Ace, we can sit together and maybe have a whole other group chat online in the den about how we can put that together. But I think it is a different conversation. It's a different answer. And you really have to say, it's online versus at the table when you're answering that question to make sure the context is there.
I definitely think two things that I think are really powerful about online that you kind of really have to understand when you're transitioning from a tabletop to an online is, first of all, you have so many more tools at your disposal online if you go forth and get them. Now, it requires a certain level of technical aptitude and stuff like that. But I definitely think that what you're able to bring to the a virtual table is so much more than what most of us can bring to a physical table, that people who kind of just try and do what they do at the table and kind of just take that straight to online, I think you're definitely losing out on stuff. I think it's definitely like, hey, get the new skill set, get all the tools that you have available, and that's what is going to really help you be able to draw people in. And then also in some aspects, like really just streamline your job. Again, tying that, and absolutely, if you paint minis and build terrain and stuff like that, and that's your hobby for just stress relief and stuff like that, awesome. But if you're kind of like me, where that stuff's fun, but when it's like I now have to build 4 different battle maps and I have to get all this kind of stuff in order to get preparation for this game, versus being able to take that same time and just, hey, let me just find the art that I need, go through, plug it in, and let me take the time going through and adjusting these other tools to bring on in. I definitely think that there's a certain skill set that you can definitely harness when you're doing online. The other thing that I think is really great when I was running my online stream was the actual thing that I really liked about online was that only one person talks at a time. And as far as immersion goes, I kind of liked that because it just made it so that way there's the talking stick, and it was like, hey, that person's the one that's talking, because that's just how the audio and stuff works out, which means that when it's on them, they're working the spotlight and such. And in the meantime, the other players can go through inside of their back chat and stuff like that. It's quiet, it's non-distracting. They can kind of work that and whatnot. I can go through and I can say, hey, while this person's role playing and they're doing their monologue, I can nudge somebody else to kind of go over and keep things moving and whatnot. But when the communication is really just streamlined like that, I think there's some aspects where that immersion can really just help grip more than what you normally get at a table, which is, hey, I'm trying to have, a really serious role play with Stacy about how her mother just died and now she has to go through and take up her father's cause and all this kind of other stuff. And Ace and Thomas are over here sharing memes over inside of the background, distracted us and kind of breaking that whole mood and whatnot.
So to touch on that at the table, I encourage having phones out. I know that's controversial, right? Mm-hmm. But I do encourage having phones out, having a private chat amongst the players themselves, so that when I'm having a one-on-one time at the table and the other people are bored or whatever, they can do their own thing. They can do their planning. They can do their turn. They can share memes. It cuts down on the audible distraction. And I found exactly what you said. The conversations are streamlined online because only one person can talk. Well, when there's an additional way for people to have that private off-channel conversation and it's not audible distracting the person who's actually doing the scene, that helps. Mm-hmm. So I know that people hate sometimes that I say, okay, get your phones out, get up the private chat, because they think that that's distracting, but it is cut down on derailment at my tables so much.
The thing about it is that what you're talking, the problem that people have when they're pulling out phones or stuff like that is that a lot of times people are pulling out their phone to escape the table. They're going over, they're texting friends, they're looking on Facebook and like that. You're talking about like, hey, have your phone, but you're still present at the table. And now you're present at the table in 4D, by using this other resource that you have. And so there's an aspect where it's like, hey, your buy-in is still here. Yep. If you're doodling in your notebook, if you're doing all this kind of other whatnot, again, you're especially what I know what the Secret of Shells, I'm gonna guess that one, especially what they're talking about in regards to players who have ADHD, people who are neurospicy is the newest term that I learned 2 weeks ago. That was the first time I was texting a girl and she was like, oh, you're neurospicy too? And I was like, I'm very confused at what you're trying to insinuate right now. And she's like, oh, yeah, I have ADHD. And I was like, oh, yeah, that. Yes, that is, yes, I'm very, very spicy brain. They're still present at the table, and they're present. And what you're doing is you're helping streamline all that, so that way they can go through and they can be present at the table in an easier way. Ace, did you have anything you wanted to throw on there also?
I was going to say, I actually have come to learn to agree with all that, especially online. I think it's great because my players, while there's a scene going on between, it could be something deep or dark or heavy, but their character's also in the middle of something, much like in a real life scenario. If there's this big argument going over here, if they're not a person who gets engaged in those big arguments, like, can I roll to have my character step away so I can do this small private thing I've been wanting to do, and now is the time I can get away with it because none of them are looking. And secretly, all my players seem to think that they're also the big bad evil guy in their own way somehow. I can let them do that while not also stopping the story. Let them roll for their roll, step to the side. And if somebody notices, I can say, and you also notice that off to the side, he's reading the book of all the evil things that you all just found and said you were not going to read at all. And he's halfway through the book already. And it just brings everybody back into like, what do you mean he's reading the book? You didn't pay attention. I don't know what to say. You read the book. You're sitting there reading the book. So I think all those things are great. And it's also, a lot of this is also just knowing and understanding the type of players that you have, because those who are neurospicy, they need to be able to fidget. They need those things to be able to release that energy. And if you don't give that to them, there's no way that your game can move forward, because even as a DM, I'm sure we've all clocked out of a moment in our game when our players are doing something off the rails and we're like, spent 20 minutes talking about baked bread. What are we? Yeah. So anyway, we move on to the next. It's just a natural.
Open the door, Gary. Just open the damn door.
You all did a perception check. You all got a 6. You see nothing wrong with the door. Well, there's got to be something bad with the door.
I don't know what you guys are talking about. During those times, I'm frantically trying to play in the next, encounter that I totally forgot to do. So,
can I add one thing to it?
Absolutely.
One thing too, I think with players, it's they have to look on the other side of the screen and see, like, is their GM spicy? I am spicy as heck. So I know it's easy for me on the other side because I have so many things in Roll20 to fidget with. All these other handouts and things that I can mess with and things that I can touch. And what I'd use as a tool is my Discord. I have extra channels, and I actually encourage them to post memes that are related to what we just did. It's Galaxy Quest memes, or and it exploded, whatever. Put it up there. Have fun with that. Post your memes that are game related in game for all of us to chuckle at, because it's related, but it keeps us all busy and engaged with each other in that moment. But we're all still within the game, and and using it. So I think that's something important for everyone at the table to look at too. Is look on the other side of the screen and see what's happening there. And fidget all you want, but bring tools to the table that you're all using in game and using together. Even if it's your phones and it's all means together, and it helps a lot.
And to pounce on that, I think that's the nice thing. So it sounds like we have 4 neurospicy DMs here at the panel, and that helps, I think, because we're all pretty sympathetic to any kind of struggle that our players would be having like that. I want to say that this attracts neurospicy people because there's 10 different things going on at any one time. So, I think that's, while it is a concern, especially for those that have the more severe types, that, for those of us that are fairly low on that neurospice spectrum, we just roll with it because we know what it's like to be in that seat.
Absolutely. One of the things that I wanted to go through and bring up way, way old ago, because I thought it was a great question. The Secrets of Shells asked, for many with disabilities, consistent immersion can be a real challenge. What's a good way to support and encourage players who bring the effort, but simply can't meet the level of immersion for reasons beyond their control? So I'm going to take the first whack at this and I'll open it up to the rest of y'all. So Secret of Shells. So my neurospicy is ADHD, PTSD, anxiety, depression, and borderline personality disorder. One of the things that I find, especially with these players, is opportunity immersion. So, and this is where the great DMs come in. And this is where you can actually hear Alphinius Goo as he's kind of bringing up some of his stuff. As he talks about, hey, if you have a fork in the road and there's a haunted castle and it's supposed to be up to the north, when the players make a right and go south, The haunted castle's now in the south. It's the same thing when it comes to that immersion and stuff. Rather than structuring and making your story so rigid that, hey, this is the climactic moment. It's when the elven princess comes down and reveals, this or that or whatnot, be flexible that, hey, maybe the player immersion moment is when they meet that innkeeper who, is missing a leg and one of the players relates to that. And go ahead and say, hey, let me pause the rest of this and let me focus in on this moment right now that is helping this player immerse into the world and really give some depth into my world. Let me go through and build this out, use all your different techniques that you have for, maybe you didn't have a background for this guy, so let me go through and whip some stuff out. Let me make sure I'm keeping some notes to keep it consistent and make it look like I've planned this amazing experience for this one player in this moment, when in reality it's, nope, I'm just being a DM and I'm just working on my feet and working through it. Who wants to go ahead and take the torch from here? Nama Stacy, thanks for volunteering.
I think it's difficult because we have a lot of balance that we have to work within in the game, and I think that is key to remember in any aspect of what we're doing. We've got sometimes big groups, and especially I think it's harder too in the online space. We have to balance. We have to figure out what they need from the game, while remembering it's a game, because sometimes it can be tipped a little bit too far in one direction, and I have to remember my role. Sometimes too on this side of the screen is that I'm a game master, I'm a storyteller, and sometimes I'm not a therapist, and I have to remember that, and I can't step over that line. Because that can sometimes be harmful, and it's hard to say out loud, because I want to be helpful. I want to be there for my players. That's part of it. I love people. I love my players. I love the game, and I want to help them in every which way that I can. But I also need to make sure that I'm careful about that balance and where I'm at. And it's and be where, it's a difficult question. It really is to answer. And I'm going to say balance, and I'm going to leave it at that.
So you actually jumped into what was going to be my part 2 of this question, which was essentially, what is too much immersion? So I have a really fun example of this I was playing with Alphinius Goo. What you have to understand is that when you are doing a really, really good job and your players are immersed, you're really not getting a made-up character. You're getting some aspect of what is that real person's soul, that real person's personality. So you need to understand who you're playing with. Again, if you are, if a part of that person's real person, if a part of that person's real personality is a PTSD survivor, and you're creating an immersed world, there's a good chance that you're going to trigger some of that. My real personality is a Special Forces Green Beret, which means if you're sitting here and you're really trying to immerse me, I become a son of a bitch to be a player, because now on the other side of the screen, you have a guy who has millions of dollars of training and tactics, who is now trying to figure out how to survive. And I am so difficult to DM for if you're really trying to draw me in, because now, again, you have just this monster on the other side of the DM screen. And the other thing is like, all my knowledge is rooted in real life. So that's where we get it. I've gotten into different arguments and stuff where people are like, well, this is the way it is. I'm like, okay, that's cool, but this is how it is in real life. So just, you have to balance out between realism and whatnot. My example with Alphinius Goo was he had a situation where basically our group was going to go through and be captured and thrown in jail. And I didn't realize it at the time, but as he's going through and as he's forcing this, capture for us, both myself and my dad are very much like, no, you are not going to capture my character. I'm going to go through and I'm going to initiate fight. I'm going to go through and do whatever. And both me and my dad got heated at the table while we were playing across from Alphinius. And it took me a while to figure out what was going on. I've been through a course called SEER, which is Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape. that's where they go through. They teach you how to survive out in the wild. It's a really fun camping trip where you just starve for a while. But at some point they go through and they capture you and they take you into a torture camp and they teach you like, hey, this is what it's like being a POW. And basically everybody who goes through that course walks out with the same thing, which is I will never be captured alive. Alphinius doing what he does and immersing his players all of a sudden triggered that for me and my dad, who both have military experience, saying, hey, we will never be captured alive. And we are about to completely derail his campaign because we're willing to let our players die, our characters die, because of how immersed we were into that. And that's one of the things that you have to keep an eye out for is, hey, sometimes you want to go through and you want to back off that immersion. I'm very much, if I know, I do that questionnaire, that RPG consent form that allows people to go through and disclose like, hey, anything that has to deal with rape, anything that has to deal with this trauma or anything like that. So that way I can get to know my players and whatnot. And if I have something that's maybe a crucial aspect to, a story, but I feel like might go through and tap into some of that aspect, I'll just tell the player outright, hey, just a heads up, during this session, this is something that's going to happen. And I will remove them from that immersion because I don't want them to go to that dark place. And that's one of the things that you definitely have to keep an eye on as far as that, like, hey, there is too much immersion. This is a game. It's fun. It's supposed to be fun. It's fantasy. It's magic. It's all that kind of stuff. It's dragons. And sometimes you want to go through and you want to definitely pull out that immersion so that way people can go through and get that escape that they're looking for.
So
Ace, yep. Or Thomas, I was going to cue in either of you guys.
Okay. Sorry, Ace. I took your thunder. But what's interesting about that is, so I know that, as DMs, we tend to plan. We want to plan out our sessions. There is over planning, and I think we've all done it. But when you over plan, you break that. You're almost too immersed in it from the DM's perspective, and it can be detrimental to your table if you don't rely on having to think on the fly or change something up. I used to be that one. I used to have entire notebooks filled with my campaign notes and have to flip through because they did something that I didn't expect, and then I tried to railroad them back around. But when you do that, you're so immersed on your end in that it can break the game. So you have to be careful from that on the DM side as well, and allow yourself to remember, A, it is a game, and B, be flexible with what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Ace, Nama, Stacy? What hat are we on at this point?
Oh, I think I have one of those.
You said that you were going to kick me off the stream if I did not have an assortment, so I have an assortment. This is like 8.
I absolutely was. Also, I'm going to go ahead and out Camera Mandy about this. Camera Mandy is a control freak. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Partially that's because this is her entire baby and she's definitely a one-woman show and she has to wrangle one of the most hyperactive human beings in the world, which is Alphinius Goo. And we were having a chat and Thomas had said, hey, I'm going to bring an assortment of hats. And I sent out an email to everybody and I said, hey, if it is anything less than an assortment or what could be considered an assortment of hats, I'm going to kick you off stream. Camera Mandy actually texted me. She's like, will you please be nicer to everybody? And I'm like, it's fine. Don't worry. It's going to be okay. Anyways, Nama Stacy, I think you were saying something?
Oh, no, I'm just saying that there's sometimes that X cards on the GM side, too, of where we're at with immersion, Mm-hmm. And moving on with the story, moving on with the game. And I think that's something that's a good point to remember. It's a game, and that's where we there's different types of games out there. And I know with mine, that's where I'm comfortable is maintaining that story and moving on.
And that's definitely a great DM is, just like a great salesman, is just like just many different things. Being able to analyze your players is going to help you understand how to up the immersion, because you're going to understand what their motivations are. And I can go through and I can put out more cheese for the mice if that's what they're looking for. If they're looking for peanut butter, then I need to put out more peanut butter. But then the other thing it's going to let you do is going to let you know when you need to go through and bring it back down. And that's going to help you from completely derailing a game, from letting, obviously real outside emotions come on over and affect that. one of the things I want to go through and kind of transition to as we're kind of moving through is we've talked a lot about immersion. We've talked about too much immersion. We've talked about how to analyze players. We've talked about different things to go through that we can put out in order to, certain carrots, one might say, in order to help draw people to us. So now when it comes to creating your story, when you're going through and working this, some of the different themes that I've picked up on definitely are it can't be too rigid. As you try and fit players and try and shove them into the storyline, it doesn't work out, and you're going to not be able to take advantage of those opportunities for immersion. And so when you are writing, like, what's an example of, let's say it's what you're planning a role play encounter. Let's go ahead and just use an example of, hey, they are meeting with a diplomat. You're planning out this role play encounter. What is the way that you are going to structure that role play encounter as far as what information you're going to go through, pass off, what kind of tone that you're trying to do? Do you try and figure out which characters you're going to try and target or try and work at? Like, what is your guys' strategy for building out this role playing encounter, and how do you kind of like write and structure that story? Ace, go ahead.
Well, I would say the best way is normally when I think of my characters and NPCs, everyone that I try to put into, it's kind of like the PCs and all the characters we build. They're all a part of us. No matter if it's an extreme part of us, it might be my happy-go-lucky devil-may-care side, but it's still a part of my natural character. My NPCs, as a DM, they're all a part of some part of me that I've exaggerated to some random degree. And apparently I've come to find out that a lot of people like suave, confident villains who speak in a deep voice that apparently then get nicknamed Daddy a lot in the game and out of the game. That makes it only slightly awkward for my friends to be like, look, okay, that's Big Bad Daddy and we like Evil Daddy. We just don't like Evil Daddy also. And it's like, I understood that way too well. I didn't like any of that. So for me, the thing that I always come to is I like to plan my characters from a realistic state. If this is who they are as a person, why are they this way? What are their motivations outside of the players? Because they existed before they ever met the group. So if they existed before they met the group, what were they trying to do before? Are they wanting world domination? Are they just wanting to expand their power base? Do they want to leave some massive legacy to change the face of the world forever? Do they really, really want the Krabby Patty formula? Whatever it is that they really want, that's just all a part of who they are. And then how the players interact with them is how that engagement goes. So the NPC always has a motivation beyond the players. So the players can feel a part of the story, but know that the story isn't, they don't get the main character aspect in my games. They feel that they are a part of a growing world that they have to interact with, or the world will continue to move past them, which my players now try to focus on everything that's going around, and certain things they just let go and other things they get deeply and heavily involved with. So it's finding, again, what works best for those, knowing those actual players and knowing what NPCs really kind of attach to them and which ones they attach to in return, and kind of working it from there.
I'll definitely say, gosh, it's so hard not to overthink when you're building this stuff out and working it. I will say that the minimum and sometimes the maximum, good job. Jeez, holy cow. You got a pink one too? Also, is that a Harry Dresden pentacle? And then was that the hat? Oh, snap. I got the Dresden files all up here.
Badali jewelry. It's made out of silver, has an actual ruby. I just need to put hot glue on the back.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. Me and Thomas are best friends now. The two pieces of information that I try and go through and set up for any NPC is, what are they most scared of? What would they do anything for? As you're role playing, if you know those two pieces of information, you can generate most of that character's responses, motivations, all that kind of stuff. I feel like it makes it just a little bit easier. Obviously, having just a little bit of background, about if it's a government official or something like that. Hey, what do they do? Where they come? Just some of the basics. Where they come from and stuff like that. And it's a lot of times just keeping that very broad. And then as they actually become a more, prominent member, that's definitely the trick to being a GM, being really good and conserving your effort is, Everything is broad brushstrokes until the players show interest, and then you generate everything else in the back end. But definitely, as you're going through it, as you're role playing, as you're structuring that stuff, what they're most afraid of, what they'll do anything for, that'll really help you with being able to on the spot kind of work through that stuff. Now, Stacy, Thomas, do you guys have something else you want to add in? Like, how are you structuring out your role play?
Real quickly, because we're close, if not the end of it. I always approach an NPC, especially an important NPC encounter, with 2, 3, 4 outcomes that are going to happen. And then I kind of structure it like a BioWare conversation tree, written down in my notes. Just if they react this way, do this tree. If they react this way, do this tree. But they all end at these 4 things that can happen. And then I structure, if it's a very important one, I'll structure the campaign around that conversation. At least, the next bit or the next 3 bits.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, Stacy, what do you got?
Oh, well, with mine, I try to figure out what the urgent issue is surrounding the encounter, what I think the different ways that it can develop will be, how it could succeed or fail in each direction, and what the different choices and outcomes would be in each of those succeed or fail states. And they actually will map all of those different tree branches out from there. So I think it's a little bit overplanned, but that's the way I think that they'll have a different choice state. And I think that the ability to have choices on the character side as well as the NPC side is what really makes those encounters shine. That's the way you're going to have different outcomes and different directions that they can go in the larger sandbox.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, even though I am High Lord Commander of all Gooey Cube, I guess Thomas has something more important to do than sit here and talk about Dungeons and Dragons. Kind of rude, bro. I'm just saying. But I want to give you guys the Cliff Notes version if you're just getting into the end of this. Immersion. First thing you need to be able to do, analyze your players, watch their body language, ask them in session 0, work through as they are actually playing, what are things that give them more buy-in, and then go through and balance it out. There's nothing wrong with having players who are immersed in this section, letting them go off do their thing, and then having players that are immersed over in this section. Do understand that depending on what your group dynamic is, sometimes there can definitely be too much immersion, and you want to make sure that you keep an eye on that and back that off. When you're structuring out your campaign, make sure that it is not so rigid that your players have to fit into your specific story. You want to make sure that you are building the story around your players and the choices that they are working with. And then last but not least, make sure you're having fun out there. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is our sign off. Next week, we're going to be talking about mental health and tabletop role-playing games, the different things that we can go through and that you can do in order to both help your DMs and help your players who may be neurospicy, hashtag. As well as I'm pretty sure that that's going to end up dominating the entire thing since it almost took over this entire one. But if we go through and end up going into that really fast and obviously give you guys the answer for all mental illness, then we'll go ahead and switch it on over into some battle tactics. And then on June 10th, that's where we're going to go ahead and we're going to work through some more player immersion. Thomas, Ace, Nama, Stacy, thank you so much for coming out today. Do you guys have any announcements real quick that you need to put out for the group or anything like that? Any streams, side projects?
Yeah, I have my second Roll20 game is coming out next week called Fortune and Glory. So enjoy that. There's a whip.
Awesome. Where is that up on Twitch? Or are you up on Facebook? Or are you going to post it up in the den? What are you thinking here?
It'll be in the den. It'll be everywhere.
Okay, this is probably one of the best comments that I've seen inside of the entire thing. So Kim Mororo, you win best comment of the day for Nama Spicy.
Yes,
absolutely. Ace, Thomas, did you guys have any announcements or anything like that? Ace is going to talk to us about the background submission thing again that I was unprepared for.
Yeah, the Gooey Cube background submissions, which you can find on the Gooey Cube website. You can help create backgrounds for the new standardized characters that are going to be in the upcoming campaign at Gen Con, which I'm aware of because I agreed to write some of that, and I got into a musical, and then life got all about that, and work changed departments, and it was like, that does go off in 4 days. You have till June 1st. So get it done this week sometime, however, as I will try to find out. As far as me, you can find me at Ace Overton on most things. I have a YouTube channel with gaming clips. You can actually see my Aegis Academy stream, which is basically D&D adventurers as a profession, and My Hero Academia as they go to school to learn to be professional adventurers. And you can imagine how well that's gone for them, as they've already literally called a demon apocalypse in their first year. So that happens every Sunday night, which you can find on my Twitch channel. It starts a little late at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. But other than that, you can generally find me around the den enjoying all things Gooey whenever I can find time and my schedule to be there.
Awesome. And Nerdly Keen, got anything else?
I don't, unfortunately. I'm not in any streaming game. I don't have a podcast anymore. This is it. But if you see somebody that's the Nerdly King online, it's probably me, except for Twitter, because I made fun of Elon Musk and he beat me off the platform. So
it's awesome.
There's that.
I wish I was that important to get bullied by billionaires. That'd be awesome.
Right.
Ladies and gentlemen, don't bother me. Stay away from me. Don't try and track me down or anything like that. But everybody all together, ladies and gentlemen, may all your adventures be sticky. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Take care.